You're listening to the Yoga Medicine Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Land. This podcast brings you information and resources to enhance the therapeutic effects of your practice based on a deeper understanding of anatomy, physiology, and the integration of modern science and research with traditional practices and experiences. Join me and my co-hosts Tiffany Cruikshank and Katya Bach as we dive into all things yoga, research, and wellness.
The content of this podcast is not medical advice and is not meant to replace medical care. Please consult your healthcare provider to determine what is best for your unique healthcare needs.
Hello, Aisa, and welcome to the Yoga Medicine Podcast. I'm really excited to catch up with you and to hear about what's been going on for you over the past few years.
Oh, hey, Rachel. So nice to be here. I'm really excited to share. And it's been a great time.
She says with reservations. It's been a great time. It's been an interesting couple of years, I guess.
Yes. Interesting couple of years. So many changes.
Well, we might start by kind of going back in time, all the way back to the misty reaches of the past when you first discovered yoga. So we're talking today, and our kind of big overriding theme is about health and healing. And I think this is a perfect topic for you because you've always struck me as somebody who is just ridiculously, obnoxiously healthy. You know, physically, mentally, you've always come across as somebody who just takes good care of themselves. So whether that turns out to be true, we'll find out today. Ooh, exciting. But I thought we might...
Big mystery.
The mysteries unraveled. But I thought we might start by circling all the way back to how you found yoga practice, when that was and how it came about.
Oh, wow. You weren't lying when you said going...
The distant reaches of the past.
Yeah. Going that while back. So I had just moved to the city, to Manila, from a little province where I am now. I had just moved to Manila, and I was 15, so I had moved for school to be in university, and I had found a yoga DVD while
back
cleaning
in the
up
day.
the house. Right? Yeah, that kind of shows you how far back this experience was, right? So it was through a yoga DVD with this lady who looked like she was ready to go to a Jane Fonda dance party. And I tried it out, and I loved it so much that it was played over and over again up until it just wouldn't play anymore. Right, you know how that happens with DVDs when they're so used up, and that didn't last very long. That went on for about maybe 2-3 months, and then life happened, school happened, and the few years after that, I had found myself in a very, very dark place, like having ended a very toxic relationship that lasted for a while, and a good friend of mine knew that I was trying to find ways to cope, and she invited me to a Bikram yoga class. And I remember being there right after practice. I was on the floor, drenched in my own pool of sweat, and it just felt like, oh wow, this is bliss. This is enlightenment. and that was it. Like, that was the first day of the rest of my life, pretty much.
There's something about Bikram. I know it kind of gets a bad rap in people outside the Bikram circle, but I know in my personal experience, if you're suffering, if there's a lot going on internally, that is a practice that holds a really specific container where there's not a lot of time for you to think or feel during the practice. It's like you're in a completely different mode or zone. And at times that can be incredibly healing, just to have space between you and what's going on in your life.
Yeah, that's so true. To have somebody there tell you what to do at exactly that very specific point in time, just tell me what to do. Right.
No options, no space for thought or consideration. Just this is what you do, and now you do this, and now you do this, and now you do this. And there really is some therapy in that at times when you're completely overwhelmed, isn't there?
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. And also just being able to sweat it out so much because you're inside this room that's like an oven. And
Hmm.
like it's already really so hot here in the Philippines, right?
Yes, it's like you hardly
But
need temperature control to do Bikram in the Philippines.
we only have two seasons here in this country. It's armpit sweating a little or armpit sweating a whole lot. Those are our two seasons here.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So Bikram was the beginning. How long did you stay with the Bikram practice, or did you branch out straight away?
Um, I stuck with Bikram yoga for about maybe 2 years, and
Mm.
then within that 2 years, I was also pretty much trying out all these different types of asana in the city across all these different studios. And I had lunch with really good yoga friends. I love them so much. One day, and then we decided, well, we don't want to pay for yoga studio membership anymore. So let's just open our own little shala. Let's just open our own little studio, have a few friends over to practice with us, and let's just not make a very big deal out of it. And it's funny because it started out that way, and I'm not sure how it transitioned to finally being a chain of studios after a good couple of years. So if COVID did not happen, we would have been on our 12th year
Oh,
as a chain
wow.
of studios. So just about maybe 3 years after I started practicing Bikram yoga, that's when we opened the very first of our 7 studios, and it was in this beautiful space. Oh my gosh! It was on the 11th floor of a corporate building in the middle of the central business district. We had floor to ceiling glass windows where you could have wonderful views. The sunset was crazy. It was so
Mm.
awesome. And we had built a really good community of people just coming in and sharing space. And they became not just friends, but family. Imagine just having to be there every single day and seeing the same people
Mm.
every day.
I'm
Yeah.
just imagining the elevator to take you up to the 11th floor where there's a mixture of people in suits and then people in like yoga tops and shorts or sweaty on the way back down. That must have been some interesting elevator trips.
Uh-huh. Yep, yep. And walking through the lobby just like in slippers.
Mhm.
Right? It was funny because now that you mention it, it's funny because there was when we were relatively new, I think people would get confused, like why would there be people walking through our nice corporate lobby like in really sexy hot yoga shorts and, and almost nothing for a top and slippers. So there was a short time where they wouldn't allow us to pass through the lobby wearing that. So we had to cover up really well. And after a while, they kind of eased up
Got used to
on
it.
all those, just realizing
Mm.
what we were as a studio and what we did and how we had to be dressed that way.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting also when the power would just be out because then you'd have to walk 11 flights up the stairs,
That sounds
which was,
unpleasant.
yeah, just good
In
warm up.
in slightly sweaty or completely sweaty armpit territory. Either way, it sounds quite unpleasant. So, when did you start teaching? When you opened that initial space, were you already teaching or were you still just, in inverted commas, just a practitioner?
Yeah, I was just practicing when we had
Mm.
opened the first studio, and it was just soon after that when, and I realized, so you already have a space, and it's such a beautiful space. And the more I practiced, the more of this calling came, right? Like this inspiration to just want to teach here and share it because it's so good,
Mm.
right? It's just a desire to share it because it's so good and it's changed me in so many ways. And I, people say it all the time. If it's so good and if it's so life changing, it's meant to be shared. So that's when I decided to take my first yoga teacher training in a little island in Thailand. Oh, in Koh Samui. That's where I met you too.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. So I did my first hot yoga teacher training then. Came back home, started teaching hot yoga, and uh, it wasn't very long up until I decided to take another teacher training. I took a vinyasa training with Bryony and Dice,
Oh, lovely.
and and a few more, a few others after that. I think like there's something about teacher trainings, right? Like
It's very addictive because
it's
once you
very
start gathering
addicting.
information, you want more information. You think, oh, I'm so enjoying this, but I'd love to know a little bit more about that. If I could just go that direction. Yeah, it really gets you sucked in, doesn't it?
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's so true. And halfway through maybe the first 3 years of me just being on like a teacher training spree, I had traveled to um, Jakarta to join a yoga festival. And that's where I had taken Tiffany's class because she was one of
Ah,
the teachers. Yeah. So I was there. I remember practicing beside her, and it was like an inversion class of Bryony and Dice. And later in the day, I practiced her class. And I was like, wow, this girl is such a nerd. she, she's such a nerd, and I love
mhm,
her. And she's
mhm.
got these awesome toe rings, and I'm gonna learn from her one day.
Yes. I think that's the appeal of Tiffany is I think there are a lot of yoga teachers, especially in that sort of international circuit that happened a lot pre-COVID, that were big personalities and would walk in and completely own and inhabit a space. And she's just a little bit more kind of quiet and humble and self-effacing. And it's the information that really shines, even though she can do pretty extraordinary things in her practice. That's not what seems to stand out to those of us who've carried on training with yoga medicine. It's the nerdishness and the humility and the passion for information
Yeah,
and maybe the
yeah,
toe
it's
rings.
and the toe rings. And I think it's also the way she spoke then, right? Like
Mm,
it's very conversational. It's
mm.
the way she was teaching and delivering all her cues. Like she was just speaking to me like this, like a nice conversation.
For a lot of people, their yoga practice is their movement practice. And it does seem, from what I remember of your practice, that physically you can do some pretty incredible and pretty challenging things. But yoga isn't all you do movement wise. It seems like you do every single sport. You run, you bike, you dive, you do jujitsu, you name it. You've dabbled in it and, seem to be quite successful. So I'm curious, what is it about movement and maybe particularly outdoor movement that's so important to you?
I well, I guess you can say that like ever since I could remember, I was already a mover. Um, I was already practicing some kind of movement, and it started with me being a really a little girl, and ballet was the thing, right? Ballet
Uh-huh.
was the thing to do. I'm not sure if it was because of all the pretty pink tutus that really drew me to the practice. That was my first experience of a movement practice, and it really stuck. It stuck for a long time. I was dancing ballet for about maybe 10 years up until I finally made it to high school. And um, that's when football came into my life, playing soccer. And
That's a
that was a
slight
really big
difference
thing.
from ballet.
Right? Yeah, I know.
Mhm.
I know. Like to talk about like being in the opposite end of the spectrum altogether. And that was it. Like just spending so much time in the field and training. Like that training life really was. was life changing, right? It
Mm.
just made everything so much better, something to look forward to in the day. And then I had moved to the city for university, and it just seemed like partying was so much more interesting than much more interesting than sports.
Uh-huh.
So that was me retiring from my soccer career. Also, having injured myself, I had surgery for my knees on my left knee to
Mm.
fix a torn lateral meniscus, and just kind of getting back at it after surgery, after rehab, just didn't kind of feel the same
Yeah.
anymore. And just being in a new city and having a new coach, having a new team, just kind of changed how I saw
Broke the
me
rhythm.
playing on the field altogether.
Mm.
Right. And then there were many others that came after that. There was ultimate frisbee that was relatively new in the country. I know it's pretty big in
It
It's
actually is
big
pretty
in
big in
New
New Zealand.
Zealand.
Yeah. And there, most places you
It's
go, there'll be a
huge.
little metal basket for people to practice their disc
Yeah.
throws while they're out and about. I don't look at me. I
Uh-huh.
have no hand-eye coordination, but you're right. Ultimate frisbee is a big deal in New Zealand.
Yeah, yeah. And then back then, when I had started, it was fairly new. So there was a very limited number of players in the country. So I don't know how that even happened, but we were lucky enough to make it to the national team. So we trained for big tournaments. Like I had my fair share of international tournaments with a team
I feel
up
like this should
until
factor higher on your Instagram bio. I had no idea that you were an ultimate frisbee superstar. This should be right up the top.
not a superstar, not a superstar, just had so much fun playing. um, and this was also like a very long time ago, right?
Mm.
And then after maybe about 6 years of playing, like I found all these new people coming in, a lot younger than me, who can run so much faster than me, and I was like, well, that's probably it for me now.
I'm
and
retiring,
then also,
hanging up
and
my
then also
frisbee.
life, yeah, like life happened. The yoga
Mhm.
came in, and
Mhm.
you know, interest shift right after a while. Yeah,
Yeah.
and uh, that's when I stopped playing ultimate frisbee. That's when I started surfing. Although I was a big city girl, and for a city girl to be a surfer, right? It's hard because then you'd have to make all these weekend trips or holiday trips far from the city just to make it. Just
Mm.
to have like a good 10 hours of surf in the weekend before you have to head back to the city and live your city life. Yeah, but a lot of that changed, especially like over the last 2 years when COVID happened, and
Yeah.
it was very restricting and limiting. And that's when I had found a lot of the running and the cycling.
Oh, I see. So that was more recent. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was going to ask you about the pandemic because I read an Instagram post of yours and you have a quote in here that really spoke to me, not because I'm a runner, but because of the other things that I do outside. It's from Kristen Armstrong. Do you remember this quote? So you
Mhm.
said, there is something magical about running. After a certain distance, it transcends the body. Then a bit further, it transcends the mind. A bit further yet, and what you have before you laid bare is the soul. So it
Wow.
really made me think this is somebody for whom exercise is not just going through the motions. There's something about your physical pursuits that feel the same as a lot of people's yoga practice, that it's the body, it's the breath, it's the mind, it's a meditative and almost spiritual place. So what was the pandemic like? That must have put some brakes on a lot of the things that you loved to do.
Oh, pretty much ended everything,
Mm.
stopped everything. The biggest change as soon as the pandemic started was us shutting down the yoga studios. And that was probably one of the biggest heartbreaks in my life, because we had been around for almost a full decade, the
Mm.
longest relationship, my
Yeah.
longest relationship ever, right? And to have to end that was just like heartbreaking in so many levels. And I needed something to
Did you shift to online or permanently shut the doors? Did you see the writing on the wall?
We were able to shift all of our classes online straight away.
Mm-hmm.
We were just so lucky because about 2 months prior to our first lockdown, we already had plans of setting up a virtual learning space, a virtual
Oh,
teaching space. Yeah, just so that we could get more of our classes, more of our teacher trainings to the smaller towns, to the
mm-hmm.
smaller cities in the country. Because you know how this country is just like very small islands put together, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
hard for people to come. Like it's hard for people to come to just practice with us. So the plan of having an online, a digital platform was already there. So there were already plans of which app to use
Mm-hmm.
and which teachers to come in first. So the transition from face-to-face classes in the studio to a virtual space happened instantly. Like we
Mm.
were probably one of the first studios in the country um, who was able to do that straight away. I mean, like it wasn't very seamless in the start. We all
Oh
had
no,
like
I'm
hiccups
sure.
here, there, and everywhere, and internet connection and microphone problems. Man, it
Mm.
was just like one problem after another. But like over time and practice, like we just kind of got a good rhythm going.
Mm.
So teaching online, uh, it ended up being easy uh, very quickly. Yeah, and people adjusted. People adjusted to
Yeah.
the kind of practicing, that way of practicing.
Yeah, it has made us celebrate our flexibility, that's for sure. But given how much you spoke about the impact that the physical space of your studio had on you, I can see why there would be some real grief and loss associated with not having that physical space and the in-person interpersonal relationships and community. It's
Yeah,
in some ways better teaching and practicing online, in some ways worse practicing and teaching online, but it's different. I think that's
right.
for sure.
Yeah, I mean, just like anything, right? You have
Hmm.
you have pros and cons
Mm.
to everything, but it definitely was a sad transition in my life. Like I saw these studios as my babies, right?
Mm.
Like just kind of seeing them grow from absolute nothingness, and then just having to say bye to them.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So
when
that
did
was
running and biking enter the picture? I noticed that in your Zoom teaching space, you had a treadmill and a wind trainer for your bike set up right behind the yoga mat. So was that just you were cycling from one to the other to the other?
so it had started with actually the cycling happened first.
Mm.
That was one of the few things that we were allowed to do outdoors, and also the only thing that made me feel safe doing, right.
Mm.
At least like I'm not stuck in just one place and having to be with other people. um, so the cycling happened first, and finally got myself a bike after not owning a bike for a really long time. And there would be, weekend cycle trips with a few friends, but most of the time it was just me training indoors on a bike trainer.
Mm.
And then that kind of set up the the space for me for like this training life, like having time in the day to just really do something.
So
do so-
was that the trick? Like, for somebody who had a real passion for being outside, whether that was surfing or diving or playing frisbee golf or playing football, soccer, was that the trick to getting yourself excited about practicing something physical indoors? Was to switch to that training mindset, like I'm an
Mhm.
athlete and this is my training, and mm,
Yes, that's to just have to write out that schedule in the week. And you don't even have to be so strict about it, right? But to just have it, to see it that, okay,
mm,
like like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, like are my training days. And I just really need to set aside the hour, or whether it's, 30 minutes or maybe even just 15, to just really
Mm.
sweat it out.
Mm.
Um, and and have that time for yourself really makes a big difference, right? To just see it on your calendar more than
Yeah.
anything else. And then so back to the running. About 3 months after our first lockdown, a good friend of mine calls me, and she's like, "Oh, I was supposed to join a marathon in Sydney this year, sometime in November, and of course, all of the races were canceled. So let's just come and run it anyway. Do you want to train with me?" And she had sent me the 16-week training program of Blackmore's.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that was the program that they were giving out to people who signed up for the race. I'm not really 100% sure about that, but that was the program for that year, that Blackmore's was giving out. And it was great. It was a 16-week program that was divided into 4 phases, with
Mm-hmm.
each phase working on something specific. So whether it's endurance, strength, um, um, uh,
Speed.
speed, yes,
Mm-hmm.
speed. Thank you. And of course, like all the racing mechanics to get you so prepared for race day. So that's what pretty much kept me busy that first COVID year. Just having something, and it was so wonderful, like to have something every day
Mm-hmm.
to do, because it's written out for you,
Mm.
right? So
The
you know
structure.
exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
and I love that, and to see, and it's kind of just reaffirmed, like how wonderful our bodies are, because it just adapts so well, right? It adapts and adjusts so well, and it changes so quickly.
Mm.
Imagine that, from, I wouldn't really say zero, from a baseline of zero, because there was already some athleticism prior, but I just say, like, from a beginner mindset,
Mm.
right? Like the growth was just exponential in a span of 16 weeks. Um, and we finally ran that, sometime late in November, and
I
it
presume
was great.
virtually.
Um, we had we did that. So it was me and about 5 other friends. We trained virtually together.
Mm-hmm.
We had this thread on WhatsApp, just updating each other
Nice.
on how our training went that day, or just talking about other things, like what are we gonna do when this when this 16-week program is over? Like, how will life go on? And
Mm-hmm.
which first marathon are you gonna sign up for when COVID is done and over with? But yeah, like, so for the most part, I had seen those people that I trained with virtually only then, like on race day.
Oh, so you did an in-person race, physically in person.
We ran in this. There's this big gated community. It's a village south of Manila, and it's one of the safer villages. So that's where we decided to run our 42-kilometer marathon.
So that
And it
must have been
was,
an adjustment if you've been mostly training inside on a treadmill.
I said, oh,
Yeah,
oh
running
yeah,
outside it's a little different on the
for
body.
sure. And that was my biggest concern, right? Like, how would my joints take this concrete
Mm-hmm.
after running on a nice treadmill for 16 weeks? Yep. But although I did have some outdoor running days, all throughout the program, but
Mm-hmm.
definitely not for 5 hours.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a difference. And how did you feel when you finished your 42-kilometer run?
Oh wow, it felt great.
Yeah.
It was wonderful. Yeah, it's like a totally different kind of high altogether. It's like I had all these great hormones. I could feel my brain just exploding with all these happy hormones.
So I can see how that would have kind of supported you through the pandemic, of all of the things that you'd had were gone or were changed at least, but you had this sense of structure and routine, but also progress. Like it was leading you somewhere, it was building to something that felt like an achievement. What was it like after that event when that was finished? Did you have a sense of, oh no, now what?
A little bit, yeah, to some
Mm,
degree. To some degree, it's like, how would life go on right now that there's no program and
mhm,
there's no race just yet to train for? That really helped. I feel like the 16-week program really helped in setting that habit, right? That habit, that mindset that there really has to be some time in the day, and it doesn't
mhm,
really matter how long, doesn't matter how hard you train in the day, but it's really about the consistency and the frequency, as compared to, okay, well, I feel inspired to do something and I'm just gonna do so much in one day and it's going to leave me so sore and so strained,
yeah.
debilitated for the next few days, right? Like unable to do
Frequency over
anything,
intensity and frequency over duration.
right?
For everything, I think, in life that really matters.
Yep, yep. Something that's sustainable for sure. And that
Mm.
that also really helped me be inspired to find something that was sustainable, because like you can't be training for a marathon all year long.
Well, you
Right?
can. I mean, there are
Yeah.
lots of professional
Well,
marathon runners, but you've got to have those big cycles, haven't you? Rest and
yes.
recovery. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, yeah. That's what I meant. Like I couldn't be doing that same program
Yes.
just
Every day, every 16
one
weeks.
after
Yeah,
the other. Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure.
So that really helped me reorganize what my body needed at that specific point in time. And it took a while. I think it took a while for me to adjust and to
Mm,
slow down a little
mm,
bit, slow down and not train so hard, and just make space for more restorative practices,
mm.
slower practices for sure. And maybe also change it up a little bit, right?
Because even like yoga teacher trainings get a little bit addictive. I feel like any physical pursuit can get like that too. When you have the feeling of I'm growing, I'm adapting, I'm getting better, I'm getting stronger, I'm getting faster, having to step back from that can give you that feeling of loss of achievement and loss of progress. And it can be
Yeah,
difficult to sit with that and not immediately grab something else that gives you that very satisfying feeling of progress.
right. Especially for type A personality like mine, right? You always want to do more and
Hmm.
train more and feel
Hmm.
like you're just achieving more.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, like it's not like I'm gonna go pro. So
Well, never say never.
I'll get back to you on that
Okay,
when it
keep me
happens.
posted. So all of this is kind of leading up to the first part of the pandemic is sounding, challenging but positive. You had found ways to turn a really difficult time into a time of growth and
Mhm.
development and change. And then at some point last year, you had a bad fall down the stairs and broke your foot. And I imagine
Mhm.
that being not just physically challenging with, teaching work and a young son and life to live, but also a loss of that physical activity that had been sustaining you through the pandemic. So, talk to me a little about that foot injury.
So I had fallen down the stairs, and it was a really freak accident. I was about to go down to play soccer with my son Kai, and I had everything with me. I had all the dogs, I had all the soccer balls, all the cones, and just next thing I knew, I was literally rolling down the stairs like one of my soccer balls, and
Oh,
I had gotten up. I felt something in my foot. I stood up and I was like, oh, it's probably just a sprain. And I'll just keep at it. So I still went down, played with Kai. And the moment I went back upstairs, that's when I removed my shoe, and oh wow, it was like all purple all over, like as purple as an eggplant,
oh.
and swollen a lot. So I knew there was something wrong. I knew there was something wrong.
Mm,
And I had gotten help for it, but it never occurred to me to go to the hospital to just have an X-ray. Right, that was the last of my options. One, because there's COVID, right? Because there was a virus out there, and the last place that I wanted to be in was a hospital. So and two, at the I've gotten hurt this way playing soccer for so many years, and it's in my head. It's probably just a sprain,
And it's one of those tricky
or
spots too. It's kind of on the middle of the outside of the foot where I don't know. I don't think I'd think about it the same way as, oh, I've got a broken toe. It's a part of the foot
uh,
that kind of looks solid from the outside. You don't necessarily think about all the little joints that are inside that structure.
yeah, yeah. And I had just
Mm,
told myself that I've gotten hurt this way, strained and sprained so many times that I just probably need to give it a week or two
mm,
to finally feel better. And after 2 weeks, it still wasn't better, but I had gone out on a long summer holiday with my son. We kind of moved to the beach for the summer, and I chose joy over pain.
which sounds like a really positive thing. From the outside, sounds lovely.
Yeah. Choosing joy over pain and still doing all these things
Mm,
that in hindsight I shouldn't have done, still swimming, kayaking, and trying to run, even with the pain, running after my child.
mm,
And luckily, one of our neighbors in that place by the beach, he just happened to be an orthopedic surgeon, and then he saw me one day, like the first time that he saw me, he was like, "Oh, why are you limping that way?" And I said, well, I had fallen down the stairs about 3 weeks ago, but it's probably just a sprain, so I should be better in no time. And then he's like, "No, not a sprain. if it's been 3 weeks, there's something up. There's something more that's up with that. So
mm.
here, let me write you a request for an X-ray. You're gonna drive back to the city today, go get that X-ray done, send me the images right away, and then I'll get you sorted out." Really kind guy. And then, so I did the exact same. I did exactly as he said, and I was there in a small clinic, and I saw the images, and I did not have to send it over to him to know what was going on.
Yeah.
Like all these different broken pieces of my fifth metatarsal on my foot, and I was like, "Oh boy, I'm screwed." Yeah. So I had gotten um, uh, an appointment with a surgeon straight away, a different surgeon, because he was still based in the beach then. So I had to
Mhm.
find somebody in the city to tend to my injury right away, because I knew what had to be done. I knew that I needed surgery for it. So it was really fast. Like in about 5 days, I was scheduled to go into surgery, and
Wow, that's
yeah.
impressive.
Yep, and I had it done straight away, because the sooner I had gotten it done in my head, like the sooner I'll also be better and be able to get back at it. Not, of course, not realizing how, oh, I knew it was going to be hard, but I didn't realize it was going to be that hard.
When we were talking about the podcast beforehand, you said, and I quote, it super duper changed the way I see healing and movement and the body as a whole, changed my practice too a lot. So let's talk first about how you see healing and movement and the body, because you do a lot of your work, as I do, one on one with people who are post injury. How did you having this surgical intervention change the way that you see the body and change the way that you perceive healing, given that you've got quite a bit of experience working with people through the healing process?
Mhm. I realized that well, one, it's a lot harder when you're trying to heal yourself,
Yeah.
right?
It's harder when
It's
you're
like,
in it than it is to watch, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, for sure. Like if I had to make a therapy plan for my case for somebody else, it's like I'd be able to come up with something
Mm,
easily, right? But then finally it happened to me, and then like all that knowledge just flew out the window instantly.
mm,
Right. And I was just really blessed to have friends. The wellness industry in Manila is very, very small. So just you end up being friends with somebody who's a PT or somebody who's a sports and orthopedic specialist. And I had really good friends who took care of me and did my rehab with me. So kind of felt like just kind of starting from scratch, right? Starting from scratch, like literally learning how to walk again. And that really changed the way I see uh, the body and how it functions, and just reaffirming, I think, reaffirming that everything is connected, right? What's going on with your foot is going on with your hip and your spine and your shoulders and the rest of your periphery, right? Everything is connected in that way. And to take time to slow down, to start from scratch and then heal all these different smaller parts so that you are able to be a functional whole, right? Um, was really the big thing for me, right? And then just realizing where the weakness is, where the tightness is, so that you are able to address those. Um, yeah, was where I started, and it was very humbling, right? It was a very humbling experience, just not being able to do everything that you used to do.
I get you. I think there's some really interesting things, even in what you've said already. The first one being that having knowledge is not enough. It doesn't really matter if you know what you should do. Having a supportive community around you makes the healing process completely different. Having people who are just one step removed so that they have a little more perspective than you do in the midst of it can be such a powerful thing in healing. And then to talk about
Right, right.
being willing to step backwards, maybe even a long way backwards, and to start over again and kind of rebuild patterns from the base up.
Mhm.
Humbling to do, but you learn
Yeah.
so much along the way. Injury and illness can offer us fantastic opportunities to learn, even if we don't appreciate them in the
Mhm.
moment.
Yes, for sure,
Mm,
for sure. And there's also something about, kind of being in the opposite end of of, of the healthcare
yeah.
equation, right? As you said, and just healing from an injury made me realize that you are still able to extend so much more compassion to others, right? Like being injured has given me the space to just learn to be more compassionate and kind and way more gentle to the people that I work with, especially those experiencing pain, right?
Mm,
And in so many ways, how can I be of better service to these people? How can I talk to them in a better way? How can I understand their pain
mm,
so much more, right? And maybe there's a softer way to speak to them. Maybe I am able to adjust all my therapy plans so that it's more manageable, right? It's more accessible to them, because then what I thought was easy probably wasn't easy for them to begin with,
mm,
right? It's yeah. So what was easy for them maybe might not have been easy after all. And it's me
mm,
realizing that, because there I am just learning how to walk.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it really highlights to me the importance of communication when you're working with people who are healing
Yeah.
or in any kind of recovery, of really
Hmm.
understanding from them what their experience is. How are you feeling? Is this too much? Is this not enough? Is this the right amount? Is this the right direction? What do you need today? Do you need to rest today? Do you need to move today? Do you need challenge
Yes.
today? And just helping people navigate their
Hmm.
experience and kind of sitting just far enough on the outside to help them find clarity, I guess, is so
Yeah.
important when you're working with people who are healing.
Hmm. Yeah, that's right. And
Mm,
the same goes. The compassion that you extend to them, I've learned, is the same that you extend to yourself, right? Because you can't fill from an empty cup. And and that's when I realized, when I really had time to slow down, it's like, wow, there's very little time in the day that I really give myself to refill, to replenish, and restore, right? Because for the last how many years, it's been just me kind of spreading myself out too thin. And with the work that we do, we give ourselves, we give off of ourselves
Yeah.
so much, right, in the form of time, of energy, of effort. And then if we run out of fuel, because we do so much in the day and we want to do so much in the day, and then we're just exhausted and we won't be able to give anything really, right?
And I think for a
Or
lot of
it's
us, it's easier to be patient and compassionate with others than it is ourselves. And maybe this injury was an opportunity for you to think, look at what a difference gentleness and kindness and compassion make. Well, have I been giving myself enough of that in years past?
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Even to just say that, okay, exactly what you said earlier before we started recording, that just giving yourself that time. Okay, I'm not going to work anytime before 7 a.m.
Yeah. This
Right, to
is
just
my
be,
rule for those of you who are listening.
yeah,
I don't Zoom
right.
before 7 a.m. Nobody wants to see me Zooming
Right.
before 7 a.m. So that's my rule for myself and for the benefit of
Right.
others too. But yeah,
Yeah,
setting some boundaries.
boundaries is so important, just
Mm,
to be able to feel well and healthy and supported by your own self,
mm.
right? And really, patience. I feel like patience is a very big thing. Patience is not one of my big qualities. So I feel like it was the universe's way of just kind of slapping me on the face, like, here, I'm going to give you something to practice patience.
Mm. Or the pandemic didn't work, not a problem. I can do better than the pandemic. I can do an injury. That'll slow you down. No, it's true, isn't it? I think about the yin and yang symbol in that context a lot of if we're always in the yang, always in the busy and the doing, and we don't heed the signals that we need time to rest, those signals will get louder and more insistent until we're forced to. And sometimes that's how it happens. We're forced to head to the yin side and rebuild our reserves and our resources.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it sounds like you have a slightly different perspective on healing now than what you had before when you
Yeah,
were working with people who were healing. Now that you're experiencing it yourself, maybe your perspective has shifted a little bit.
yeah.
Mm,
Shifted a lot. Shifted a lot. And there's also a deeper understanding, right? A deeper understanding of my own body,
mm,
and how it will heal, not just from a physical perspective of healing, but the totality of healing, right?
mm,
Like healing from the head space, healing from the heart space,
mm.
um, can help so much in healing physically, right? And it's a process, right? And like what you said, it's
And you're right, it really is all connected. Not just the foot is connected to the knee, is connected to the hip,
yeah.
is connected to the shoulder, but also the body is connected to the mind and to our experiences and our heart. And it really is all connected. You can't work on one aspect without influencing all of the others.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
saying that and experiencing that are two really different things, aren't they?
Yes, for sure, for
Mm.
sure. And it,
And
it
when
sorry, go ahead, go
no, I was just
ahead.
thinking your foot injury, you were within 3 or 4 weeks of having the injury, getting the surgery, and then beginning your rehab process. But
Mhm.
even in that time, you had noticed little patterns that had built up around you, protecting that foot and guarding it from pain. Imagine
Oh,
if you were a
yes.
student, and I'm sure you've worked with them as I have, where that was 5 years ago or 10 years ago, how deeply etched those patterns would be, not just in their bodies, but in their minds as well.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And to have to break that pattern, right? To have to
Mm.
break the pattern of guarding
Mm.
so much. Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah.
So you also mentioned that you've recently moved from the big city, from Manila, back into the province where you grew up, which is less populated and quieter, and the pace is perhaps a little bit different. Has that made you think differently about healing too?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Mm,
From being in a concrete jungle, right, for almost 2 decades of my life, where there's very little space, very little green.
mm,
Um, Although there would be like small patches of green here and there, but it really felt like you were in the
hang on, I've lost your audio.
hello.
There you go. So go back
Okay.
to it really
Okay.
felt as if little patches of green, it really felt as if.
So living in this bubble that was really toxic and just constrained, right? It really felt, you really would feel it. You'd feel it deep in your bones, right?
Mm,
Like this, the tightness, the constriction, the strain, really, and just not having that freedom to be able to breathe, right, with ease. Um, and I only had felt this huge difference just moving back home and finally having all that open space. And it's just, that the feeling of, wow, I can breathe so much better,
mm,
right? I can breathe so much better. It's like there's no fear in breathing because the air is cleaner and there's
mm,
probably not a lot of COVID in the air here. Right. And I started sleeping better. That was the big thing that I noticed after having moved back home. I could get myself to stay sleeping for a longer time, and it would really feel like restful
mm,
sleep, right? Like waking up just feeling like you're ready for the day, because you've gotten that good amount of rest. And
mm,
I really believe that it's, your living condition affects affects everything. When you don't have fresh air, when you don't have all that open space, and you're just constricted in this or just around concrete, right?
mm.
Like
I think
literally
we,
living in a shoebox, right?
yeah,
You're living in a shoebox, one stacked over the other, and just concrete all around you, right?
and I think we think about health as being a sort of single state, this monolithic state of we're either healthy or we're not. We're healthy, meaning there's an absence of illness or injury. There's this idea that our energy is the same, and there's this sort of one note. I get the feeling that that's the sort of Western perspective on health. But when you're in touch with nature, you notice that nothing in nature is single state, monolithic,
Mhm.
always the same. Nature always goes in cycles. There are patterns of growth and things coming to fruit and then things dying off and things going dormant. There are always ebbs and flows in everything in nature, whether that's through the day, through the seasons, through the year. And I think that can be the challenge that we face when we're living in a really urban environment where there's a disconnection from those cycles, where we're in artificial lighting, we're in artificial temperature, we don't have easy access to nature, and we're always on the go. There's that sort of level of intensity. And so maybe
Mhm.
you are able to access that feeling of things going in ebbs and flows and cycles by coming back to somewhere that was quieter and more rural. But hopefully, there are ways that people can do that even in city life, but probably not by accident. It will probably take some
Yeah.
thought and attention.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
from what you've learned in the past couple of years and from all of the patterns of your own that you have had to change, what advice would you give to people who are wanting to support a state of health, whether they have an injury or not?
I think the big thing would be taking time to slow down.
Mm,
Taking time to slow down and just go towards the opposite end of the spectrum of just having to do so many things, like to do something, to be somewhere, to wear all these different hats that we have to wear in the day, right? To find a practice that um, that is sustainable, right? just a balance of many things, and slowing down also enough that you are able to just be still, right? To be still and be silent, because I feel like that's really where we are able to tune into what we need,
Mm.
right? And to find out what we really need in our lives at that specific moment in time so that we can adjust, right? Like what you said, like it's always in ebbs and flows and things change and our needs also change,
Mm-hmm.
right? So whether it's us changing routines, right? Routines in the day, routines in the week, changing schedules, changing relationships,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like all these things that are
Diet,
huge factors. Yeah,
movement,
diet,
yeah,
all these things
everything.
that are a huge factor in us feeling well and healthy. I feel like that's really where we are able to discover that when we're still, when we're in stillness, when we're in slow movement, when we're in silence. Yep.
I think that's incredibly powerful because I think you've hit the nail on the head. A lot of us are looking for a sort of prescription of how do I structure my day to be healthy? What do I eat to be healthy? What movement program should I do to be healthy? What do I need to control around my sleep to be healthy? And it just isn't that cut and dried. And I
Yep.
think you've hit the nail on the head. The most important thing is for us all to slow down enough to find those moments of stillness, to figure out where we're at on the spectrum and what we need. Do we need to, increase our pace or our energy or move toward growth? Do we need to do less and be softer and more compassionate and more gentle?
Mm-hmm.
And we only know what we need when we're quiet enough to listen.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. And
Well, maybe that's a nice place to leave it. Maybe that's a nice place to kind of leave it for those of us who, whether we're really in the thick of the pandemic or whether we're dealing with an injury or whether we're living in a city and trying to figure out why we find it difficult to take a deep breath, maybe that's a nice place to leave it, of just each of us being encouraged to slow down enough to find some stillness.
yep. Yeah. And it applies to everybody, really, like what you said, right? You don't have to be recovering from an injury uh, to begin making time for that and just
Mm.
finding that time for yourself and making space.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and to share your experiences. For people who are interested in finding out more about you outside of Yoga Medicine Online, where would you direct them?
I'm sorry, can you say that again? I
Uh,
lost you a bit.
Other than Yoga Medicine Online, for people who are interested in finding out more about you and what you do, where would you send them?
Oh, so you can find me on Instagram. You can find me in social media. I have all of my contact details there. I'm also on the Yoga Medicine Teachers page.
Woohoo!
So you're able to, yeah, so you're able to reach me through there. If you just need a good practice to get you going, or if you need some therapy work, whether you're recovering from an injury or even just prehab work.
Mm.
Um, just, yeah, prehab work, just so that you are able to keep yourself healthy and well and avoid an injury, because we don't ever want that, right?
In a perfect world, we would learn all the lessons without having to get to that point.
Yeah, yes, yes, for sure, for sure.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us all today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks for listening to Yoga Medicine. If you liked the show, be sure to subscribe and leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you got something out of this episode, please spread the word and share it with a friend. You can find more information, articles, trainings, and classes at yogamedicine.com. Check us out on social media as Yoga Medicine, or you can email us at info@yogamedicine.com. Thank you for being part of our Yoga Medicine community.
The content of this podcast is not medical advice and is not meant to replace medical care. Please consult your healthcare provider to determine what is best for your unique healthcare needs.